One of the most paralyzing feelings that you could ever have is when you're struggling financially. And it affects everything. It affects your confidence and the way that you think and the way that you walk, the way that you talk. And Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich, he talks about how fear paralyzes the faculties of imagination. And so it's hard to even be creative. It's hard to get anything done. It's hard to be productive in your marriage and your workforce when you're struggling financially. Now, right now in America in 2026, there's a lot of people that are winning in a big way. And there's a lot of incomes and a lot of people that you could see that are up there. But there's a lot of people out there that are struggling and they're check to check. And it affects their hope and their quality of life and where they're going. And I wanted to give you a couple stories of times in my life where I had to have faith, financial faith. I had to really have financial faith that something was going to happen. And it was times where I felt like it wasn't how I felt. I had no money. And I had it was dwindling it was making my confidence just dwindle away. It was affecting everything. Even food didn't taste as good, and movies that you like aren't even as good when you watch them. And even things that you like are negatively affected when you're struggling financially. And so you could look at it like it's doomsday and it'll never improve and God's never going to move in your life. Or you could look at it like, hey, this is temporary, like pain. This is just a temporary pain and I'm going to bounce out of this. And I hope that the stories could give you a little bit of encouragement, because it's easy to tell these later on after you've been successful. But when you're going through it, holy moly, it was terrible. Oftentimes when I speak in front of groups of people, I say, I remember getting into business and driving a car I didn't like. To a place I didn't like, in traffic I didn't like, a lot of times to work with people that I didn't even like. And please don't judge me. I just didn't enjoy the process. And on Wednesday it was hump day, and Friday's happy hour, and Saturday's a barbecue, and Sunday you're depressed because your football team lost, or you spent time with your family, and although you loved your family, they kind of just poured more negativity in your mind, and it just affects your thinking. And the worst part is a lot of times when we're on our way up, we haven't yet developed the mental disciplines. We don't have the emotional intelligence. So even processing what we hear, what we read, and what we see just doesn't work. The words of our family members and our friends, again, although they're the ones we love, they really hit us, and it just feels like a knife that just cuts you, and you're just and it affects you. It affects you a lot. And so I have many stories. Actually, I could probably do an entire docu-series on struggling financially at different stages of your life, but I wanted to pick some in the young adult time of my life, and not when I was a kid and seeing some of the stuff that my mom did when we struggled with welfare and food stamps and really didn't have anything like that. I wanted to do it more from the perspective where I had a little bit more control, and I was a young adult into my working years. And the first one comes when I was a young entrepreneur, and this was in the early 2000s, and I had just gotten out of school, and I had gotten into my first business. And I remember that I would hear the word entrepreneur, and I even studied entrepreneurship, and I don't even really know, outside of being your own boss or being a business owner, it just sounded way cooler than accounting or finance. I liked entrepreneurship. I was excited to create something, but I wasn't very creative. And I don't even know if I still am. I'm good at copying. I'm good at operating. I'm good at telling stories. But that was a different time for me. I had never been in a formal sales position. I sold shoes at Hush Puppies, but I never was in a position where I was like in a formal sales trained position. So I didn't really know that. But I got into sales and financial services. And I started in 2005, and now it was about 2006. And it was, maybe I was in the business for 10 months, 12 months, something like this. And I remember I was so excited. I thought I was like a big shot, and I made a little bit of money part-time. So then I go full-time, and I quit my job. And at the time, I felt like I was such a tough guy. I felt like I was so cool, and I was getting recognized, and people were starting to notice me. And when you lack the development in your brain with the mental discipline, sometimes that stuff goes to your head, it goes to your ego, it makes you feel like maybe something that you're not. And I remember, I'm smiling about it right now because I would just laugh at that person. I would just look back and laugh at that person. But it wasn't funny. I remember living in an apartment, and I sold my mom. I said, Mom, we need to live by the office. And we moved in Southern California to one part. From one part we were in to another part, which was about 45 minutes away. And that required her to get new doctors, and it required her, and my mom was disabled at the time. And so it was really inconvenient. But I really wanted to be a flag carrier. I wanted to be the guy. I wanted to go out there and make it happen. And so I remember we were at that apartment, and she lived in the apartment, and I had this little L-shaped desk from IKEA, and I had built it, and I built it all wrong, so I had to reinforce it so many different times with these little steel plates, but that's not part of the story. And I would sit there, and I kept my finances on graph paper. So I had graph paper that you flip like this, and I would write down every expense. If I spent $6.32, I would write it down on graph paper. Now, today your phones do all of this for you, and you have these ledgers, but back then banking wasn't done that way. And so I would write it out. And I remember writing it in black if I was in the positive, and I'd remember writing it in red if I was in the negative. And I remember I just kept seeing red, and it just seemed like every time I was going to make a little bit of advancement, that there would be some fee or a flat tire or a speeding ticket or something that would set me backwards. And it was so discouraging. And it was so discouraging. And I remember that there was this one time where I was reconciling my bills, and I had never been late. And I would pride myself on being late. I was always broke, but never late. Listen, I was always broke, but never late. And I wasn't poor. I don't like the word poor. I don't even like the word broke. I still have like trauma from that feeling. If you guys know what I'm talking about, if you've ever seen your bank balance a certain way or your credit a certain way, and I had nothing going for me. And at this stage, I had already borrowed my brother's student aid from, Josh was in San Diego State, and I even borrowed his college money, and I remember I'd borrowed everything that I could get, and I got everything that I could get, and it just wasn't enough. And I was paying my bills, and it dawned on me in that moment, I wasn't going to have it. And it really affected me inside. And I was going through I was like, my body temperature rose, my heartbeat started going fast. I was really scared. I felt like a loser. And I was sitting at the desk, and I was looking at my bank account, and it had something around the neighborhood of $280 to $330. It was around $300. And I don't remember the exact amount, but it was around that number. And I remember looking at it, and then I was looking at my rent that was due, and I owed like a couple $1,000s in the next week. I hadn't owed it. I wasn't behind yet, but in the next week I owed this money. And I was sitting there, and I was like, man, what do I do? If you only have $300, but you have like 8 things to pay for, what do you do? And of course you have to prioritize. And I thought, okay, I'm going to pay. No. Okay, I'm going to pay. No. Maybe I'm going to pay. No. And I was so discouraged. And I remember something that just came over me. And then I don't know if God talked to me. I don't know if I felt like he talked to me. I don't know if it was a spirit. I don't know if I was at this stage, I wasn't disciplined and walking in the Holy Spirit. So I wouldn't even know what I was listening to at this time. I believed in God, but I didn't know if he was there for me right there. And I remember going, you know what? If anybody's going to get $300, it's not going to be AT&T, okay? It's not going to be the electric bill. It's not going to be the gas bill. It's not going to be this bill or that bill. It's going to be God. And so I remember saying my church was Mount Cross Lutheran Church. And I remember I looked at my balance in my account, and I wrote a check. And I wrote the check, and I paid it to my church. And I said, I'm clearing out my account for my church. And I felt like I was in an action movie. I was like, if I'm going to go down, we're going down with giving it to God. Like, going down, nobody's paying attention to me. I'm sitting in my apartment that I could barely pay for, and my mom's sleeping, and I'm doing all my finances before my mom woke up because I never wanted her to find out how we were really doing. And I was probably 23, 24 years old at this time, 23 I think I was, and I was looking at it, and I wrote the check, and then I sent it to my church, and I felt like I was so noble, like I just did something great for humanity, or like the world was going to change because I contributed $300 to my church. But let me tell you this, although I may speak with a level of sarcasm or some humor, there was something serious in the message. And the seriousness in the message is that I had financial faith, okay? Now, my faith wasn't in money, my faith was in God, but I needed to act on my faith with my money, okay? And I cleared out my account. And I acted on faith, and I said, well, if it's going to happen, if God's going to take care of me, I'd rather give him everything that I got and trust that he's going to take care of me. Not because I'm a good person, not because I'm smart, not because I'm wise, but because I was desperate. And I was at my lowest point. And I remember doing that. And it's easier to tell that story now like it was a thoughtful process and here's the discipline that I showed. And in reality, it was a desperate move to get God to pay attention to me or to show that my heart posture was pure. Now, if you take these actions and you do it in a way where your heart is not pure, I don't believe that God will bless that. I believe that God knows exactly how your heart posture is. And so that goes for forgiveness, reconciliation, everything else that you deal with in your life. But let's stay on financial faith. I wrote that check. So then I proceed to go to my office and do my business, and I got nothing. I mean, we're not going to lunch. People are like, you want to go to lunch? And I was like, I already ate, I'm full. But you know what that's like. It's if you've been in this situation, you just know that you can't afford it, nor do you want to be put in an uncomfortable position. And I never wanted anybody to know, and I didn't talk to anybody about it. I didn't even tell my pastor. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell my girlfriend. I didn't tell anybody in my life what was going on. But I was lonely and I was scared. Okay, now watch this. Following week. Now I'm in an organization that's compensating twice a week, and the commissions come out twice a week, and I'm going in to look at my commissions. All right, and at this stage, I'm barely holding on, like the cartoons when your straw is just barely coming out of the water. If you remember those cartoons, I felt like I was in that situation, and I look at this balance, and it said something like $3,200. And I was like, 3,200. Now, immediately, I even got worse. Why? Because I wasn't expecting any commissions. And so when I saw it, I assumed it was a negative commission, what we call a chargeback. And what a chargeback is if you sell business and you get an advance on your commissions, but then the client ends up not accepting it, it will be deducted. And at this stage, there's no way in my mind that anything was going to pay me $3,200. So I assumed it was a negative. So right when I saw a comma and a 3, it was 3 and a comma, and I looked at it, I was like, oh, my stomach just sank, and I was like, what the heck? I thought, man, for a moment, I was never mad. I was never mad at God, but for a moment, I was just like, man, there I was trying to do the right thing, and it's still not going to work. And I've never been mad at God. I've waited. I've been impatient at times, but never mad. And so I was sitting there, and I looked closer. And I was like, $3,200 and something dollars. What? Like what? And I could be off on the amounts, but it was about $3,000. And I was like, what is that? And then my next memory went like this. Wait a minute. They made a mistake. And in my mind, I was like, yes, they made a mistake in my favor. Now, I know that banks and commissionable things are going to get reconciled. But to me, if there was a mistake, it would take at least 7 to 10 days to correct. And I was like, yes, they made a mistake. I don't know who they is. I don't know if it was my bank. I don't know if it was my sales organization. I don't know what it was, but I was like, they made a mistake. They're going to fix it. But at least I could cover the rent, and then I could get the money in another week. And that my brain started calculating this could be my bridge. Maybe God's acting in the form of a mistake. But then my brain was like, God doesn't act in the form of a mistake. God, if he wanted to give me money, will just give me money. He doesn't need to give me a mistake. A mistake is done by people. God doesn't make mistakes. And so my brain was like, no, it can't be a mistake. And then I looked closer again. So remember, first I thought it was a negative. Then I thought it was a mistake. Then I thought, wait a minute. And I clicked on it. And I'll never forget seeing the name, Rick Floyd Alvarez. And sir, I apologize for using your name on a video, but I'll never forget you. Mr. Alvarez was a client of mine, and he was a fisherman. And he would go out and he would catch these large amounts of fish, and then he would come back and he would sell them, and that was his business. And earlier in the year, he had done a financial transaction with me where I got paid the first half up front by my sales organization, okay? And the second half would be paid out over the course of months 6 through 12, so I wasn't expecting it. Well, apparently, 3 days prior, he had come back, gotten a deposit, and then put money into that account that I set up. I had never had any of my clients. I mean, I probably had like 17 clients at this time, 15 clients, maybe it was 5 clients. I don't know. It wasn't a lot. But I remember that I didn't even have clients. Nobody had ever put money in anything without me having to do the work. I always had to do all the work. But this time I didn't have to do the work. And although Rick Floyd Alvarez went out there and did the work as far as fishing is concerned, in reality, it was God that did the work. And I remember sitting there in that moment and tears just started going down my face. And if you've ever been in this situation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because just like it says in Matthew, that, and Jesus says this, that if God takes care of the birds, you know, and he makes sure that they don't have to store food, but that they could just find food. And if he takes care of the birds and he takes care of all the animals, then aren't we more important? Why wouldn't he take care of us? And because we have the power of thought and our brains are more complex than that of a sparrow, we tend to think negatively and we think small and we go to these places in our minds that may not serve us. And I want to encourage you in this moment. I looked at that balance and I was able to pay my rent, and I went and I thanked him so much. I actually drove to his house and I said, "You have no idea how awesome what you did was." And he was like, "I just put money in my account." He didn't think it was a big deal. And he fed me some of the fish. It was fresh from the Southern California oceans. And man, I'm hungry. It's making me think about it. But it's not like just hungry for food. It's hungry for God. It's hungry for the Spirit. It's hungry for more. When I was eating, he said, "Hey, I've got some fish. You know, I have a lot of it. Would you like me to cook you something?" And I remember that he cooked me fish. And we sat there and I was like, man, I'm the one that gave you financial advice as to what to buy, but I'm the one that needs the financial help. And I needed to eat. And I also needed to be fed spiritually. And I got fed spiritually. And I'll never forget that drive to somewhere in the Ojai, California area. It was a beautiful part of Southern California. It was or North Ventura or somewhere up there. And I don't remember, and I'm sorry, Mr. Alvarez, if I forgot where you lived, somewhere between Ventura and Santa Barbara. But when I was looking at it, I was like, and looking and reflecting on that moment, I never was scared about money again. I never was scared about money again, ever. I was never scared about money again. It was so important and so impactful. And I wanted to share that with you because you never know when it's going to happen. And I've got some more stories for you, but I'm going to be wrapping up with this one. And I wanted to really, really, really hammer this home because if you're going through it right now, if your car's not working properly, or if you're behind in rent, or even worse, that you're in debt, I want you to understand something, that you maybe you've allowed pride or ego to not lean on God. Maybe you've tried to count on yourself or believe in yourself, but you need to put that belief somewhere else. I believe that God does test us. I believe that God doesn't want anything negative for us, but he does have a plan. And the work that he wants to do in our life sometimes requires us to be chiseled a little bit harder, to go through some adversity a little bit more, to have a level of mental toughness increase a little bit more, or your spiritual maturity to be found a little bit more. And I used to believe that everything bad that happened was of the devil, and everything good that happened was that of God. And I realized later that God's in control of everything. And that why would I want to believe in a sovereign God who is only in control of good things that happened? And that although the devil's constantly working against God, God's in control. And God allows us to go through a process so that we could learn these lessons. So that 20 years later, I'm telling you these stories on a video because I could remember that fish like it was yesterday. I could remember that Hewlett-Packard computer screen like it was yesterday. I remember that graph paper like it was yesterday. And it changed my life. It changed my life, and it gave me some fortitude, and it helped me fortify my own faith deeper. Okay, so that instead of thinking that it was all on me or I had to rely on myself, that I could rely on God during these tough times. And I think I'll film a part 2 of this because I've got a couple more stories and other times where I was down. And I want to encourage you. And the purpose of this lesson is to encourage you, is to make you understand that if you feel like you're behind financially, or you feel like it's not enough, I want you to know something. You're going to bounce out of it. And not only are you going to bounce out of it, you're not just going to survive, you're going to thrive. And great things are coming for you. And what God has in store for you is magical. It's amazing, and it's of God. And so your struggle right now is maybe you've made some bad decisions, but it's okay to start making good decisions. Stop living in guilt. Don't live in shame. Whatever you did in the past can be reconciled. You can be redeemed, and that you can go out there and you can make some good decisions moving forward. And God will see that. Just make sure that your heart posture is in the right place. Make sure that you forgive those who maybe you're holding something against right now. And make sure that before you go to God, that you forgive your brothers and sisters for the things that they've done to you, so that God could then bless you in that process. I'd love to hear from you. If you have a story similar to this, reach out, contact, post below. And if you find this valuable, go ahead and subscribe it, share it with other people, because a lot of people you may know right now may need this encouragement. It could be a video just like this that could cause them to get to the next level in their life. I hope you choose to be a leader for life.